Today, we'll discuss ancient shamanic practices and Curanderismo Soul Retrieval. Hi, it's Cheryl Sitz here with a brand new conscious conversation on exploring possibilities. We broadcast to you on journeyofpossibilities.com, Apple Podcast, Google Play, Stitcher, and now on YouTube/Cheryl Sitz. By the way, this show is going to be going to twice a month beginning in September. Same channel distribution, and just wanted to let you know that. And we'll be chatting with Erika Buenaflor in just a moment. So this week, I recorded a couple of brief 15-minute interviews for a client of mine, and she wanted to put media, interactive media like that on her website to let people know more information about what she does. I thought that was a brilliant idea. We could do that for our listeners. What else can we do for our listeners, Mario?
Well, that's the beautiful thing about who we are. It's like we actually have the capability to put you on the internet in every way. I mean, we can put you on Instagram, we can put you on Facebook, we can put you on YouTube, and give you some pointers of how to do it.
I had somebody the other day say, well, I've never done a YouTube live. I don't know how to do it. We can teach them that.
Yes, definitely. That's one of the things because the way you and I work, we like to empower everybody. So rather than them relying on us, I mean, we can do that for them for the first few ones, but we really want you to take charge of it, and you can see what all is involved.
We do it with our energy work, we do it with our coaching, and we do it with our online skills. We empower you to reach more people and make a bigger difference. Contact us, CherylSitz.com
and MarioRosales.com.
Erika Buenaflor is passionate about helping us realize our bliss. With over 20 years as a practicing curandera, she mentored with curandera and shaman in the Maya Yucatan jungle, Peru, and LA, and studied MesoAmerican curanderismo in academia. She has a master's in religious studies focusing on MesoAmerican shamanism from the University of California at Riverside. Her website is realizeyourbliss.com, and she joins us now. Welcome, Erika.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you.
So glad to have you with us today. I appreciate you creating some space in your calendar to visit with us.
Thank you for having me.
So I love your book, and I'm so excited to jump into it. But before I do, I'd really like to get to know a little better how you were drawn into this path that has been both academic and experiential for you around shamanism.
Well, it's actually, it comes from my family. I come from a long line of grandmother curanderas. My great-great-grandmother was a very well-known curandera in Chihuahua, Mexico, during the Mexican Revolution. She was a businesswoman. She owned a saloon and she was a curandera. So there's all these amazing stories about her in the family. And my great-grandmother also was in the tradition. My grandmother actually became a nurse, but nonetheless, I was still very much exposed to that as growing up. And when I came here, I'm first generation, when I came to the States after my father passed away, I was a little bit disassociated from my culture, so to speak, because I came at a time where it wasn't looked favorably to speak in Spanish at all in any way. So now it's a little bit more popular to speak in Spanish and other languages as well.
Yes.
So when I got to college, I was very fortunate to be around some very progressive Chicanic studies professors who encouraged all of us to get in touch with our background, with our history, with our indigenous roots, and along with our Mexican culture as well, and the history of it. And it was something that I had never been exposed to on a cultural / academic level. It was very it was like come here and quickly assimilate kind of thing.
Right.
So it was something like, oh my God, I love my culture. My culture is awesome. So it was actually my part of that was my soul retrieval too.
Yeah.
And that's been an ongoing process for me as well. And then, I went to UCLA at the time where they were doing hunger strikes to have a Chicanic studies department, because it was actually at the time nowhere did they have a Chicanic studies department. Now it's a little bit more accepted in schools, which is great. But this was at the time they were doing hunger strikes, and I came after the hunger strikes, but there was still a lot of activism, walkouts in the classes, a lot of social justice awareness. So that very much influenced me. So my spiritual awakening happened with a lot of social justice issues. And I decided while I was in college, I'm like, I'm going to be an attorney. And I was very idealistic. And I still am, but in a very different level, I should say. And my second year in law school, the universe had something else in mind for me. I met my first two mentors down in the Yucatan. I went thinking that I was going to be going on a trip. I got somewhat derailed, so to speak. I met this gentleman who introduced me to my first two mentors, very unbeknownst. He called himself a gringo. We missed our flight, and it just happened. It was very synchronistic how everything happened. And I remember my first limpia, which is a shamanic cleanse. One of my mentors at that time, Don Tomas, he looked at me. He's like, so, mija, what are you going to be doing? And I told him, I'm going to law school and I'm going to be doing social justice. And he looked at me, he just started kind of giggling. And he's like, you're not going to like it. And I'm looking at him and I'm just like thinking to myself, well, how does this gentleman know what I'm going to like and not like? He just met me, and he's like, you're a curandera. Yeah. And I looked at him and I was like, oh, okay. But there was a part of me that I knew that he was saying was truth. Because, I remember 5 years old and doing my first limpia. I was making remedios, which are healing potions with herbs. Growing up, that's what I would do. I'd get my mortar, my pestle and my mortar and mold things together. And I was very much already practicing growing up. For the first 7 years, I actually went back to the Yucatan pretty much every 4 months. And because I was just, I told myself I didn't know why I was doing what I was doing, but I just loved it. So I was mentoring with principally 2 mentors at that time. There were a few others that I met as well, but there were 2 principal mentors that I had at that time. And then in 2005, I was, so I was already working as an attorney. I went to a work convention. I decided to go hiking after the work convention. And I did a very deep meditation, trance meditation, and I had a time slip. Literally hours had gone by when I thought minutes had gone by. And I jumped up and I didn't ground myself at this very deep meditation. And I slipped and fell off a canyon. It was, way over 30 feet. And I woke up with a skull fracture, brain hemorrhage, left AC dislocated, 2 vertebrae in my back fractured. I completely shattered my coccyx. Left leg I fractured in 3 places. Right leg, knee down, all of my bones shattered and came out of my heel. I got severe osteomyelitis because when they put the bones back into my heel, they didn't do a culture. So they put my bones back in with the bacteria. So that ate away. 6 weeks later, they found out it ate away at half the bones in my ankle. So all those things they told me throughout that time while I was in the hospital. I was in the hospital for about a good 2 months, surgery after surgery. They would tell me all these horror stories about my body. And one of the things that I did when I first learned of all of my injuries, I decided to embrace my don. And that's a term in curanderismo, in the curanderismo traditions. It means a gift of healing from God. And I truly believe we all have it. It's just a matter of owning it and developing it and practicing it.
I agree.
So I decided, I said, if I listen to what everybody tells me about my body, I am going to be handicapped for the rest of my life. So I decided to step into my power and embrace my don. And I literally put into use, because I was in a wheelchair for almost a year, I put into use everything that I had learned as a curandera mentee, everything that I had learned. And I applied it to myself. And long story short, after not walking for almost a year, I walked with a completely normal gait in less than 2 weeks.
Wow.
And, it was really interesting because during that time, when I would have moments of crying, I wouldn't cry about being concerned about I knew my body. I knew I was going to be A-okay. I knew I was going to be 100%. I was going to be walking and dancing, everything like I used to. What I would cry about was thinking about going back to work as an attorney. And I'm and it was a very time because I was telling myself at that time when I was doing it, I'm going to make this work. I love it, very positive affirmations. Mm-hmm. But I knew at that time when I was crying about that, I just said, okay, there's something. And, I wasn't doing what I wanted to do too. So that also didn't help as well.
And we know that, right? We know when we're not doing when it's our brain trying to convince us to do something instead of our heart going, oh, I love this.
Well, and it was also because at the time I was doing defense work too. Because, it's very hard to go to, when you go to law school, to come out if you do want to do something good and get a job at a nonprofit right from the get-go.
Yes.
It's not it's like winning a lotto. It really is. So I was not really pleased with that. At the time, I was still working as a curandera. I was actually seeing people too as an attorney as well.
Wow.
So it was very interesting. It was just a very interesting dynamic that I was mentoring and I was practicing and I was even teaching classes too.
I'm trying to get an idea of what your sign might have looked like curandera, abogada.
But at the time, I didn't identify myself as a curandera. It took me a long time to embrace that. A lot of healing to really, because I think it had a lot to do with also embracing my culture, myself, doing soul retrieval work. Because even in Mexico, like the indigenous culture, it's idealized, by a lot of the murals that, especially during the Mexican Revolution that Diego Rivera painted. But the truth of the matter is, they are the ones that are in the deepest set of poverty in Mexico.
Yes.
And that's something that you see when, growing up in Mexico, for the first 5-6 years of my life, I saw that. I saw the indigenous people begging at the borders and, a lot of things that were said. And it just was one of those things of really healing a lot of paradoxes in the way that it's there are a lot of disdain for a lot of the culture in many different ways. So I decided at that time, because I didn't know exactly what I was going to do and what it was going to look like. And I was very much, it was very interesting because my grandmother, when she became a nurse, she did a turn. She did a turn in the family. And my mom was actually the first person in our family to go to college. And so was my father. So it was like, you're supposed to go to school. You're supposed to be a professional.
Right.
That was part of my brain. So I thought to myself, what if I went and I became a professor and I studied shamanism as a professor and I wrote about it, And so I said, okay, I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to try grad school. And I didn't know exactly what, but I was drawn to it because I went and I got a master's in religious studies. And during that time, I went and I pretty much dove myself into the codices, the ancient MesoAmerican records, from the ancient shamans and how they did ceremonies and rites. And it just helped explain a lot to me of, because my professors taught me a lot about the methodology, but sometimes they didn't explain to me why I was doing what I was doing or the history. And sometimes they did and sometimes they didn't. And sometimes I didn't know the questions to ask that would elicit certain responses from them.
Right.
So it was very powerful for me going back to school and really just involving myself in these ancient records and really bringing myself back to me. That's what, I hope to do. And a lot of what I teach is not just bring these earth-based traditions back to us because, I see a lot of people that are, a lot of depression. That seems to be an epidemic here, an endemic here in the United States of depression. Yes. A lot of people on antidepressants. And one of the things that I see that's very common in the depression, people that have depression, is they're very disassociated with things around them. They see them as things, and it's very different. In indigenous traditions, we see as house as having an animated spirit, as having a spirit essence. Our sacred tools, it's a very, and you also can think of it like a mindfulness kind of living, a mindfulness kind of looking at things and appreciating things and connecting with things. So along with bringing back those beautiful traditions that I'm doing in my books is also, also helping other people that were in my shoes to learn it. And because a lot of us have been dissociated from our roots, from our indigenous roots, from wherever we come from, is to embrace those beautiful traditions back into us.
Well, and as you know, because I'm really preaching to the choir here, but in our past lives, we've probably been those cultures that seem foreign to us as well. So we might as well reach out and really embrace just the best of what we can bring forward from all of these ancient practices because they're so beneficial for us in today's disconnected societies. Like you're talking about the depression and the lack of appreciation and what you talk about so well in your book, the soul retrieval of those lost parts of ourselves from trauma and so forth that we can heal and bring forward.
Definitely. Yes. Yes.
What a journey you've had. I usually ask that question and get these little answers, but lately I'm getting these big answers from people like, oh, well, let me tell you about my awakening. I jumped off a cliff or I walked off it's been interesting what people are telling me is they've been through to have their big shifts and awakenings. And wow, to live through that and tell that story and then be able to bring forward what really matters most to you now. Talk to me about your book. I know this isn't your first book, but this book is powerful. What inspired the writing of it?
So, when I started doing soul retrieval work, back in 2000, it was 2002 actually, when I took my first course in soul retrieval. And I took many different types of soul retrieval courses. And one of the first ones I learned was basically you do a session and you bring back the soul piece right away on that same session. And I remember doing something similar with somebody who I admired. She was teaching meditation. She was retired. And during our session, I saw that her daughter had come to her and told her that she was being molested. And that man who was molesting her, she never asked him to leave the house. And what I saw as a result of that was her soul pieces were literally in so many different non-ordinary realms. They were what we call just splattered in different places. Mm-hmm. So in that session, I retrieved them for her. I facilitated that retrieval, I should say. And and after the session, I didn't know whether what I was seeing was literal or metaphorical. So I was very hesitant in telling her. And I told her, well, this is what I saw, just very slowly. And she started crying. So I knew what I had seen had happened. We talked about it and she cried and she hugged me and she thanked me. But after that, I got excluded from her invites from her meditations.
Oh, no.
And, honestly, Cheryl, I was a little hurt.
Yeah.
I was a little hurt. So when I went and I told my mentor what had happened, she looked at me and she said, well, because soul retrieval, this is something that's an ancient tradition from the indigenous people, right?
Right.
So when I told her what had happened, she looked at me and she said, Mija, it doesn't always work that way. I know a lot of Westerners, you want everything quick. Take a pill, make it go away. Quick. One session, boom, bam, bing, you're done. Yeah. It's like, no, Mija, soul retrieval, oftentimes it's a process. So she took me through a process. She taught me it, and she also did soul retrieval work for me as well, facilitated that as well. And in the tradition, what it is, and it's something that there's many practices of soul retrieval practices among the indigenous peoples and curanderos and curanderas, just so many different. One thing though that is common throughout is the soul is understood as a sacred essence energy, and this sacred essence energy, it's supposed to return back to us. When we start honoring, like for example, maybe we've been in a relationship that is very traumatic, for whatever reason, or a little traumatic. When we start honoring ourselves and taking care of ourselves, and we start living, being in more healthy relationships, those pieces start coming back to us. But oftentimes what happens, or, maybe it's that child that didn't hear what they need, something that they needed to hear that they never heard or didn't happen. If those pieces haven't come back, it's because we haven't acknowledged them, we haven't worked with them, or we're repeating certain patterns that haven't really created that space for them to bring them back in. It's something that you understand. It's a process of discovering. One is, so you work with these cardinal spaces, and there's many terms in for example, the Maya, they called them the Bacabs, the sky holders, the cardinal spaces. They were entities in their own right. And they had animal totems, they had spirit guides that are basically the teachers or the holders carrying that were representatives of those cardinal spaces. So it's believed that the sun and those 5 cardinal spaces, being the south, the east, the west, the north, the center, they emit sacred essence energy. So every time we work with them, whether it's in a ceremony, and also including soul retrieval work as a ceremony, we literally get sacred essence energy. And especially when we recognize them, when we honor them, when we welcome them in. And that sacred essence energy is absolutely essential, because sometimes if there's something that we're doing that we're not honoring ourselves, we need that energy to motivate us to keep going, you know? So one of the spaces you go to, for example, you start with, in the book, I talk about it, you start with the South. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you start with that all the time, but generally speaking, most people start with the South because it's the space where you go to figure out, discover and understand what happened.
Right.
What is going on? Why did that piece leave? When did it leave? And, to be guided and to start connecting with that. And then the East is a space where you go to of death and releasing. When you figure out what habits, what patterns, what stories, what identities need to be released, so you create that healthy and loving space. The North is a space of ancestral medicine, guidance, wisdom. It doesn't necessarily mean our blood ancestors. It could be cosmic as well, Star Nation, Star Brothers, but it's guidance from the divine. And however anyone sees as the divine, whether it's nature or something. So it's curanderismo. It does require some kind of faith. And then the East is the space of new beginnings. So it's not necessarily linear where you go from one space to another, or cyclical in that manner. Sometimes it's you go back to another cardinal space, you revisit it, you go back, figure out, okay, what else do I need to release? There's something else I need to release, because a lot of the times our traumas are complex.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, and they're interwoven with various factors. So it's about, it's about treating it as a process and loving the process and loving ourselves as we're doing it, rather than saying, okay, one session, boom, bam, bing, I'm done.
I went through that too. When I started doing shamanic work, I wanted to move through my stuff and come on, let's get this done and get to the good stuff, because I've had enough bad stuff in my life. And that was the biggest lesson of all for me, was what you just said, loving myself and loving the process and allowing it to unfold one layer at a time in the order it wants to, as it wants to, and kind of finding that balance for me where I'm continuing to move forward. I'm not stalling out and quitting on myself, but I'm not pushing myself so hard in that all-American, got to get this done kind of attitude either.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
So how does this work? So would you then say that someone might navigate it as approaching a trauma that they know is holding them back, and then allowing the process to unfold the way that it best does for them, and as to which directions and so on? Yes, you could start that way. And I always encourage people to stay open, because a lot of the times there's a lot of things that are in the crevices, so to speak. So what I encourage people to do, and this is part in the book. So those cardinal spaces, they basically give us medicine. They give us sacred essence energy. They give us teachings. They help us along the way. And the soul pieces, they reside, those lost soul pieces, they reside within what we call as you may know, shamanic traditions, the non-ordinary realms. Yes.
And that generally encompasses the upper world. And there's different levels within that, but there's the upper world, the middle world, and the underworld. The underworld being our inner world often. What I instruct people to do is to go, and there's many ways. I provide different ways of how to go into a trance journey. And that's the first thing, to start facilitating that, and to connect. If someone has something in mind, like, yes, it's related to this trauma, to also be very open that oftentimes it's involved, it's convoluted, or it's complex, and there's all these other factors along with it too. So what I encourage people to do too, because something that is also an ancient understanding, that when sacred essence energy was breathed in, it was basically, we were given sacred essence energy. They were the creators, creatrix, whatever you want to call them. They breathe sacred essence energy into us. And when they did that, it got concentrated in certain parts of the body. And those certain parts of the body, we call them chakras. It's the popular term for it. It's a Sanskrit term, as you know. And that's what's mostly known. And the indigenous people also understood that it was it was very similar. Very similar. It was not, they didn't call them chakras, of course.
What did they call them?
I'm sorry?
What did they call them?
Well, they identified them, for example, the Nahuatl, the Central Mexican people, they understood them as Tonali, Teoli, and Ijoro. And it wasn't necessary. It was concentrated, for example, and the Maya also it was very similar. It was concentrated in the crown, because in a lot of the Maya vases, you see, when they're doing shapeshifting or when they're doing ceremonies, transforming into their animal spirit guides, you see them coming out of the head. The crown.
Yes.
You see a flower, and a lot of the warriors in Chichen Itza, for example, resembling the Toltec, on the crown, the brow where the third eye is at. It's visioning into that, right?
Yes.
And you see also the understanding of the breath and it being a sacred essence energy. So that can be thought of as generally like throat system, the lungs. And the heart there was always the heart. Everything was thought of the Teoli, or the center was thought of the heart. And then, the other chakras too, it was understanding more. That's more like what the Nahuatl was saying was the Ijoro. That was where the liver is at. It was the stomach area. So it resembles that. It's a little different in terms of the terminology, and there are some parallels there as well. Basically, those energy centers, what happens is, and this is also similar to, and this is how I learned it as well, was everything that has ever happened to us, that information is stored in our energy centers. And because certain memories, just like, for example, if you're thinking happy, joyous, loving thoughts, that has a certain frequency, a certain energy. Similarly, certain memories also have frequencies and energies, and they also reside in certain energy centers as well, our chakras.
And just to clarify, are you talking about everything that's happened to us across lifetimes, or just this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Everything that has ever happened to us in this lifetimes, dimensions, realities, everything.
Gotcha.
Everything. I'm definitely speaking on a quantum level, on a shamanic level.
Okay.
So everything that has ever happened to us is stored in these energy centers. And I give people like a map of what that looks like. What's generally, some of the issues that come up a lot, and what energy center to work with, or, plural energy centers as well, because sometimes it's a couple of them. And I encourage them to do breath work, because the breath work also, at the same time as we're calling on these cardinal spaces, it revitalizes us. It cleanses us. So it gives us that energy to go through the trance journey and thereforth as well. And to also stimulate their energy centers before doing the journey. And then when they're doing the journey, most importantly is to connect with their intention and their question during the journey. And this is very important, because sometimes in our journey work, we see a fragment of the answer.
Yes.
So what's really important, and sometimes, we may not think we received anything tangible. It's like, oh, well, I saw a color and a shape. I don't know what that is, or, but there's something there. So it's really important to approach it, with a lot of humility, and just be, please and thank you, help me to understand how to love myself, how I can help heal this part of me or resolve this, and being with that in the journey, and just being open-hearted about that. And if you're, really flowing with the question, most importantly. And after the journey, to continue doing your work, continue doing the work. You start in the morning. Today I'm going to be open to discovering and understanding how to heal myself, because basically what we're also doing too is by stimulating those energy centers, the chakras, which are also connected to our subtle bodies, auric fields, also known as the auric fields, our epicenter, our core field, all those subtle energies around us. it's like we're literally recording that message recording that message, those questions into our fields. So what happens as the days go by and the weeks go by and fold, everything that is energy, will help us to understand more of the answers to our questions and will interact with us. And I have a lot of, questions in terms of what you ask, what to focus on, contemplative questions, and a lot of, cleanses to do, things to do to complement that work. Because also what happens too is the distinction which a lot of us make of there being a sacred practice, in our day-to-day practice, those worlds start to blend and start to merge, where everything starts becoming, and we start remembering that our reality is something beautiful and sacred and something to be loved and cherished.
Yes. Oh, my heart's just singing over here hearing you say that. Life is a sacred practice. Yes. Isn't that fantastic? Oh, I love it when the worlds blend. It's like, wow, how have I missed this? How did I ever miss this? Well, just like this podcast, you are so informative in your book. And I have to be honest, for anybody that hasn't looked at anything shamanic, it can be a bit much because you are very thorough with the upper world, middle world, lower world, the directions and how to use them, how to journey. I mean, this is a power-packed handbook for anybody that wants to start to practice with shamanic ritual, ancient practices, and bring the spiritual essence of life vividly into their lives. Where do you get a lot of questions from the book? Is there a top question or two you'd like to address while we're chatting about it?
I think the top question that I get is, it happens is, how does the process work?
Not a light question.
Yeah, that's one of the top questions is, how does the process work? And I then turn to people and it's a beautiful reminder of, and I explain a little bit the process too. And I was encouraged to is to treat everything that we do as a graceful process, because and it's still very much ingrained in a lot of us too. Because you just said it's very much the Western or American mentality of let's get this done.
Yeah.
Let's get this done so we can get to the good stuff when we are in the good stuff.
Exactly. Isn't it like the great cosmic joke? Oh, wow, I've been living it this whole time and I just didn't know it.
Yeah, and that's one. And another one too is, you asked me beginning in terms of what motivated me to write the book? Because that's another question too. And just to come full circle with that, I realized after that session and after learning this myself, and at the very beginning, when I started offering soul retrieval sessions using this modality and using these ancient principles, I'd often get the question of, well, how long is this going to take? Can I do it in 2 or 3 sessions? And, I thought to myself, what if I gave people tools because honestly, I can explain them and I can encourage them and give them homework and tell them how to do it, but give them more viable tools, because a lot of the times the soul retrieval process, it often happens when they're not necessarily in a session.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I have a lot of clients text me, oh my God, I had something come back.
Yeah.
I feel great. I feel fantastic. And it just happened out of nowhere.
I was at the grocery store, right? The laundromat.
Exactly.
And ta-da.
Exactly. And that's really what inspired writing this book was, I wanted to give people more tools, tangible tools that, and of course I'm always here for them, whatever they need. But I also wanted to empower people so they know how to do these practices for themselves as well.
Yes. That is, I believe, what this era is all about. Not just our awakening, but coming home to empower ourselves to be the healers for ourselves that we're here to be first and learn those practices. So I just can't say enough great things about your book and the work that you're doing. And anybody that's listening to this has already figured out you definitely know what you're talking about, and you do it with a passion. So thank you for all that you're teaching and guiding us. Do you have any events where you're doing things with people live that you want to share with us now?
Yes. So it's Saturday on the 27th of July. I am doing a book signing at the Mystic Journey bookstore from 6 to 8 on Abbot Kinney. And then monthly, if you go to realizeyourbliss.com, I'm doing soul retrieval workshops. The next one's going to be on the 17th of August. And it's going to be monthly for the rest of the year. So, and we go to and we journey with all the cardinal spaces and work with them as well. So people get to experience and go to the journey, and then they also do it in a community environment as well, which can also be very helpful too. Because in a lot of the times doing the soul retrieval work, we need community. We need that. It's so helpful to have someone to say, hey, you got this.
Exactly. Exactly. So are these live or are these online? Are these live events in person, or can we do any of this work with you online?
The events that I just spoke of, the book signing, it's live, and the workshops, they are live in person. But yes, I'm always available to do it, Skype or phone or in person, or yes, definitely. But the workshops themselves are actually they're at a physical location at Crystal Matrix over in LA, Los Angeles.
Perfect. Well, don't be surprised if people fly in just for this experience, because listening to you, it's very inspiring. And for those of us that may not be comfortable just picking up the book and trying it all on our own, it might be nice to be able to go and do a workshop with you and experience that in a setting like that, and then pick up the book and try and maintain it. So it's nice to have different ways that we can learn this from you.
Thank you, Cheryl. That's such kind words. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Oh, thank you. Your book is very well written, and I love the way that you speak and share this information. You've obviously sponged it all up, and now you're giving it to the rest of us, and we appreciate it. I like to conclude my interviews, and I wish we weren't out of time, but we're running out of time soon. I want to ask you, we've talked about so many things now. Is there anything that we've missed first? Is there anything else that's on your heart you want to share with us?
Yeah, I feel also too that working with our animal spirit guides is also something very important in the soul retrieval work. And a lot of the times too, people always ask me, well, how do I connect with my animal spirit guide? And I ask them, pay attention, because there's probably an animal that's trying to court you. And maybe that squirrel that's running over and trying to run in the middle of the street getting your attention, or that bird coming to sing to you, or that crow crowing to you, or they have messages for you. So just pay attention, and they're trying to court you. A lot of times animals court us because they also want to work with us as well. And sometimes if we want to work with a specific animal, we can court them as well. And we can invite them into our dreams. They actually can also come into our dreams as well. But working with animals in the soul retrieval process, it's very beneficial because animals are amazing guides when we're working with the non-ordinary realms.
They do. They bring a strength to us and a companionship as well, and a strength of certain aspects of their character that is so refreshing when we're doing this work. We don't have to do it all by ourselves. We have these animal guides that want to come with us and lead the way.
Yes.
How could we forget about them? And I just interviewed, by the way, a couple of weeks ago, if you want to look back in the shows, check out the interview on the Shamanic Animal Medicine Guide. Brand new book, information packed, beautifully done. It's my new go-to piece. So if you're going to work with animal medicine, check that book out as well, that interview. And all right. Well, wow, this has been a great chat with you. Do you have any kind of a parting thought that you'd like to leave us with today?
Always keep to the simple. Keep to the simple. If it feels good, that's the right answer. If it doesn't feel good, don't go for it.
Can it be that easy, really? We overcomplicate everything.
Indeed.
Oh, I love it. Erika, I hope I get to meet you in person. This has been just wonderful visiting with you, and I can't wait for your next book. Do you know what you're going to write about next?
My next book is being published, Inner Traditions. They're hopefully going to send me the cover and the title next month, I hope. We'll see. It's going to be on solar and lunar rites, in MesoAmerican and in MesoAmerican Curanderismo traditions of how to work with the cycles of the sun and the moon being the periods, you know, the morning, the afternoon, the cycles of the moon, and what those energies emit and how to work with them, you know, for soul retrieval work as well, for our own health and well-being and our own cycles. So yeah, it's fun.
Oh, yeah, it is. I do that now, so I'm looking forward to learning more from that. And thank you for mentioning Inner Traditions. That is a publishing house that I work closely with. They've sent me several artists, authors and books and artists like the Animal Medicine Guide I was just talking about. So I really appreciate them, and check out their whole library. Inner Traditions is the publishing company. Well, Erika, thank you so much. I do hope I get to meet you in person, but this has been a wonderful visit.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. Have a beautiful day. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you. And thank you, listener, for joining us. Let us know what you thought of the show, and show us some love. You can support our work at journeyofpossibilities.com/support. And if you can't do anything financially, please rate the show so that others will find it. And be sure to join us next week on Exploring Possibilities.